I dreaded the idea of writing Mum's, thinking it would be hard to find what to include, as she was such a private person and fiercely fastidious. However, over the last month, as I've been coming to terms with her unexpected, sudden death, things just kept occurring to me. So the task of writing this eulogy was much easier than this delivery will be. Whilst this eulogy has been cobbled together over a few weeks, Mum's order of service was prepared well in advance, with a first draft in 2013 before my dad died, and regularly updated till 2023. Whilst it felt uncomfortable writing the order of service with her 12 years ago, and revisiting it for edits over the years, it was ultimately a blessing, as I know this service is exactly as she wanted. I may not finish this eulogy for two reasons. The first is I may be overcome with emotion, in which case my friend Graham is ready to stand in for me. The other reason being, if Mum doesn't approve of what I'm going to say, I may be struck down. I'm hoping she'll let me get to the end and consider this eulogy holistically before deciding whether to release the lightning bolt. But if she does, that will be the first time I've ever been able to finish a sentence, let alone something this long, without her interrupting me. Mum was born on the 8th of February 1937 in Aosta, Italy, to Giovanni Jon, a 33-year-old blacksmith, and Caroline Ferreira, aged 28. She was the youngest of two children, and her brother sadly died at the age of 31. Mum had a difficult childhood due to an ill-formed leg that necessitated long stays in hospital and wearing a leg brace. She walked with a limp all of her life. Her mother died when she was young, and her father not much later. Mum was brought up by her aunt and uncle and developed a lifelong friendship with her cousin Lele, who unfortunately cannot be here today. Aosta is located in the Italian Alps, just southwest of the Matterhorn and close to the borders with Switzerland and France. So despite being Italian, Mum was very fair-skinned. At the age of 21, Mum travelled to the UK to study languages. She was very pretty and always pristinely dressed. One night in the Atlantic Ballroom in Woking, Mum met a dashing chap called Jim. Despite her good looks, Mum had two left feet, and one of Dad's great passions was dancing. However, they didn't let the dancing come between them, and whilst her friends got their choices of dances, she won the main prize, and 2 years later, on the 26th of November 1960, they got married. Throughout her 53-year marriage to Dad, a Cockney with a permanent tan, most people assumed Dad was the Italian until he opened his mouth. In the early part of their marriage, Mum and Dad didn't have a car, and despite always being impeccably dressed, Mum would ride pillion on his BSA 250, often wearing a dress and heels. When the weather was cold, she'd don a sheepskin coat and mittens. Dad recounted that Mum was known to fall asleep on the back of the bike, the most notable occasion being one winter when she fell asleep as they were leaving Portsmouth and didn't wake until they were back in Shearwater. In 1963, Mum and Dad moved to their own home in Greenville Road, where she lived for 62 years. I was born in 1967, followed 22 months later by my brother Andrew. After her two sons were born, Mum rarely visited Italy, having had to renounce her citizenship to marry Dad. However, she did join us on a holiday to Lake Majore in 2017, where she was reunited with Lele. In one of the notebooks I found, Mum had written a couple of paragraphs about her childhood, and in this she said, "As both Grandad and I lost our mums when we were young, the family was everything to us. Grandad had a special gift with little children, far better than me. Both Andy and I were much luckier and happier in childhood than Mum, having two devoted parents. She never missed a school event and always encouraged us in everything we did. So whilst she may have felt Dad was better with small children, this wasn't our experience, and we couldn't have asked for a better mother." In addition to having two sons, Bruna was nanny to 7 grandchildren and a friend, rock, and surrogate relative to many more. There was nothing that Bruna would not do for those she loved, liked, and even people she hardly knew. Mum was also exceptionally loyal and discreet, taking many shared secrets with her to the grave. While she talked incessantly, she never gossiped, never judged, and always cared. When things upset her, she was stoic and would put on a brave face. When asked how she was, she'd always reply, "Plodding along." Mum has frequently been described as a big personality in a small package. Her claims to be 5 foot tall may have included some poetic license. However, her diminutive stature didn't prevent her from having room for a huge heart. Bruna invoked emotion in other people. Everyone she met loved her. On his deathbed, Dad said he couldn't have wished for a better wife. Mum always went out of her way to make people feel comfortable and welcome. Despite her loving and caring personality, Mum was a force of nature to be reckoned with. She wouldn't back down if she thought she was in the right and would stand her ground. When Andy and I were teenagers, we'd often fight. I was already 6 foot and Andy stood at least 9 inches taller than Mum, but she'd physically get between us in her attempt to separate us and stop the fight. Mum ruled the roost at home and was the matriarch of the family. Everyone who knew her was in no doubt that she was fiercely independent, both mentally and physically. Her house was immaculate. It was as if she was born with a broom in her hand. When I was younger, I recall her hoovering more than once a day. Up until she died, you'd be hard-pressed to find a speck of dust or fingerprint where it shouldn't be. Another of her passions was her garden, and while she had some professional help, she was still outside in all weathers at the age of 88, tidying the beds or dealing with the millions of leaves that fell from the oak tree in the Surrey pub at the back of her garden. It wasn't just the house and garden. Mum was much more independent than many people years younger than her. Just 5 years ago, and approaching 84 years of age, Mum tried and successfully rode a 125cc quad bike around our garden. I remember people being surprised when gangster granny videos of Mum riding the quad, set to leader of the pack by the Shangri-Las, landed in their inboxes. Mum always managed the family finances, and Dad would just hand over his weekly pay packet. She always ensured there was money for the important things in life and sacrificed luxuries, putting her children first, paying for extra lessons and school skiing trips, amongst other things. Mum was incredibly fussy with her food, and in addition to trudging between shops for the right price, she'd also check everything she'd buy to see how fresh, ripe, or firm it was. Out shopping with Debbie a couple of years ago, Mum looked through every one of about 40 packs of green beans before declaring, "I think I'll get something else." For a number of years, I tried to get Mum to accompany Debbie and me to a meal at the Waterside restaurant in Bray. But Mum would tell me she'd choke on a meal that cost that much. Not to be put off, I eventually got her and Dad to accept a meal, and they loved it so much, not only did they never decline another invite, but they subsequently went there to go for lunch a number of times themselves. One thing that made the Waterside special was Diego, the Italian maitre d'. Where a lot of Michelin restaurants in London would be intimidating, Diego went out of his way to make people feel comfortable. Needless to say, being Italian and talkative, whenever she was there, I'm sure other tables suffered, as Mum would spend an inordinate amount of time chatting to Diego in English and Italian as if they were old friends. The Waterside also reminds me of an amusing incident during one of Mum's earlier visits with Debbie and me. The two of them had popped to the ladies just after another patron had exited. Mum quickly left the bathroom, calling after the lady, "You've forgotten your purse," only for Debbie to chase after Mum and say, "No, Bruna, they have those purses on the top of every toilet." Mum had a lesion in one eye, which affected her vision for most of her life. On the occasions I was ill and off school, I remember sitting in the kitchen at the Winston Churchill, where she was the caterer. She regularly used a ruler so that figures lined up. Without this, she'd skip a row whilst looking across columns of figures. The same applied whenever she wrote a card or address, and if you looked carefully, you'd see the penciled line beneath the handwriting. No eulogy to Mum would be complete without mentioning her hair. As a child, I never saw, or at least remember seeing, her natural dark hair. All I remember was the peroxide beehive she wore for most of my life. Mum was devastated when years of bleaching meant she had to have her hair cut shorter and restyled. As a child, I remember her weekly trips to the hairdresser in Boundary Road, Woking, where the McLaren F1 team were operating out of a small garage and workshop opposite. For the past 33 years, her hair has been done by Anna, who became a close friend. Whenever we'd plan anything with Mum, it had, without exception, to be scheduled around her hair appointments with Anna. She even had her hair done before going into hospital for a mastectomy. I'd never question Mum's love, but then I never asked her to choose between Anna and me. It wasn't just her hair. Mum was always immaculately turned out, taking great pride in her appearance. For the past few years, I've had stubble and was always asked, "Why didn't you shave?" Followed by the reprimand, "You look scruffy." Even when I drove down from Suffolk to take her to hospital appointments in Guildford, I'd be told off for not bothering to shave or wearing a collar. Even when I drove down from Suffolk to take her to hospital appointments in Guildford, I'd be told off for not bothering to shave, and she'd ignore my protests that the oncologist truly wouldn't care if I wasn't wearing a collar or unshaven. So Mum, you'll be pleased to see that today, unlike all the other times when I push back, I am clean shaven. Being Italian, English was not Mum's first language, but she developed a good vocabulary and command of the spoken word, to the extent that she had a better grip of it than Dad, with whom she is now reunited and at peace. Spelling, on the other hand, was not Mum's forte, and despite her living in the UK for 67 years, I still had to describe A for apple, E for elephant, I, the one with the dot on top. During the first 47 years of my life, Dad would often say loudly, "Bruna Maria Constanza Moore." It was only when I was dealing with Dad's estate that I realised that not only had one of Mum's middle names, Costanza, been pronounced and spelt Constanza, but that her maiden name had also been written John, not Jon, on most official documents, which I had to get corrected. Spelling aside, Mum had amazing general knowledge, although in later years, often accompanied by a lack of recall. "I know it, but I can't get it out," which was often blamed on the little pill she took after her mastectomy. Although Mum blamed the little pill, and others have said it does have those side effects, the neurosurgeons told me that Mum had a previously undetected bleed on the brain, so this could also account for her recent forgetfulness and slowing down. Mum had a number of idiosyncrasies. Each morning, she would make herself a pot of tea and grill some toast in the oven. She steadfastly refused to use a toaster. She'd then butter the toast, leaving the oven on for a good half hour to keep the second slice warm while she ate the first. Whilst eating the toast, she'd attempt a crossword, and if she was with people, she'd often exclaim, "I need to get my brain into gear." When she was with us last Christmas, we'd spend evenings playing Articulate, Logo, or Trivial Pursuit. Mum's recall was variable. One evening over Christmas, she had her worst performance, not getting a single wedge and coming third to Debbie, whom she nearly always bested. But on the night before she died, Mum was on top form with all 6 wedges and just pipped to the post by me, who got lucky with dice rolls and got back to the centre for the final question. One night before Christmas, while I'm playing Trivial Pursuit, Debbie recounted a story about her own mother, Sue, who had an embarrassing incident with her hold-up stockings in Bath town centre. Mum then piped up, "I can do one better. In church a few weeks ago, both my hold-up stockings started to fall down whilst I was waiting for communion. I was walking down the aisle trying to hold them both up so that nobody noticed." Debbie then said, "I assume you said to the priest, 'I'm sorry I can't shake your hand.'" Mum replied, "It was worse than that. I had to hold out both of my hands for the bread and wine." For a prim and proper lady, Mum had a wicked sense of humour and an infectious laugh. When she laughed, everyone laughed with her. A few years ago, playing a board game with the family, Mum mixed up her words, and instead of talking about an organism, she referred to an orgasm. Realising what she said, she burst out laughing uncontrollably, and we all joined in. Mum and Dad, whilst he was alive, spent most Christmases with us in Suffolk. A regular feature of Christmas was a trip to the pantomime, which was often a present from Mum to the family. She loved the pantomime, both from the awe and wonder perspective of a child and the adult double entendre. The first time we saw Mum laugh after Dad died was the pantomime that Christmas. When Mum made friends, they were typically for life, and there are several people here who have known Mum for 30 to 60 years. Mum was fit and sprightly, and most of those friends were shocked at her sudden death, as they thought she had outlived them. However, that was not to be, and Mum's death, whilst a terrible shock, meant she avoided the indignity of getting older and losing her mental or physical capability. I've mentioned that Mum was little, and many people who knew her would recall that she often referred to the beast in her stomach. This was a growth similar to a fibroid that would enlarge and cause her to get bloated. She'd often watch what she ate or keep her stomach warm to keep the beast at bay. But for a small person, when tempted with something she liked, there was no stopping her. Mum loved Christmas pudding, and we always had at least one to ensure she wouldn't be disappointed. A few Christmases ago, Mum's eyes were much bigger than her belly. She ate close to her own body weight in Christmas pudding before declaring, "I need a hot brandy to settle my stomach." Mum hated the idea of not being able to do things, whether physical or intellectual, and was determined in her actions. She was incredibly stubborn, which ultimately led to her death. She had been told numerous times to hold on to the banister and not carry things. Yet despite there being 4 of us in the house, she went upstairs on her own with her arms full on New Year's Eve whilst I was preparing dinner. I was only a few yards away in the kitchen when I heard her fall from near the top of the stairs, resulting in a catastrophic brain injury trauma. Despite the valiant efforts of the doctor and critical care team from the East Anglian Air Ambulance, along with 3 paramedics, Mum's injuries were unsurvivable. Whilst Mum's passing was a terrible shock to the friends and family she left behind, she had told me many times that she wanted her passing to be quick. It may also have been a blessing in disguise, given the suspected previous brain injury, as Mum would not have coped if her cognitive and physical functions were further impaired by a stroke or even just older age. After writing my eulogy, I found some cards in the divan drawer under Mum's bed, including a golden anniversary card from Dad. In this, he was much more succinct than I've been today, and he wrote, "From the moment we first met, you have given your heart and soul and more to being the best wife and mother, and you can hold your head above the clouds because no one could have done it better." Bruna was everything that anyone could wish for in a mother, nanny, or friend. While she will be sorely missed, she won't be forgotten. And we can all take comfort in the fact she lived life to the full until the very end. Now I'm still standing, so I hope this eulogy has met with her approval. But before I finish, I'm going to change my tie and move from mourning her death to celebrating her life. You'll all understand why with the upcoming poem that Mum chose for her commendation. Yeah? So we've got the orders sorted out.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke to him the night before last. Yeah, the night before last. Yes, he's all ready.
Good.
So he's good to go.
Where is the order?
Behind you.
Oh, yeah.
He used to live up in that corner, actually.
Yeah, that's what I thought it
Which
was.
was easier. But Father Gerard came one day and it was here. We got somebody to move it without consultation. But it's a bit of a pain, to be quite honest.
They lost the row of seats because of that, haven't they?
Exactly. So yeah, we've got benches. We've lost another row over there as well, and another row here. And the benches are all in the garage. Also, if you're playing there and people are standing, you can't see
What's
what's happening here. We're there, you could, but hey ho. As you know, every piece is different. They come along and walk into
Have you
the
talked to Chris about the question that she used to sit up there between the readings? Have you talked to Chris about it or not?
Yes.
We have. I don't know whether she will be discussed because it's just that
Well, I would, yeah, so depending on where the auto service is,
Yeah.
so it would be on the front one. But what I would suggest is that you,
I'll go something there.
yeah, but it's easier sometimes just to go there, because when you go down there.
Oh, well, there's always one here, this one with the bell where the altar was.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is don't sit right on the very end if there's nobody else on it, because you could end up,
Kicking the bell.
you know, I'm not going to will, but
Oh.
could.
Right.
So just make sure you sit
Right, okay.
a bit onto it.
I was talking to Chris now and then, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, what about down there? Was that?
Oh, you can do it if they're sort of agile enough, it could be that they're already in there.
That's
You know,
true.
depending
Oh,
on numbers.
If I just take a photo, then I can send it to her.
I was disappointed actually. I was trying to count up the seats as convenient, but at least 100 is plenty of room in this quite big church, isn't it?
Yeah.